In respect for all the people who have showed up on time, let's do this. Welcome everyone to Cheers and Fears. My name is Shirley Weir. I'm the founder of Menopause Chicks, and I am joined today by a dear colleague of mine, and we are going to unpack the most important information that you need to know about recent research that made the headlines here in Canada just a month ago. So this is amazing that we have this opportunity. If you followed me for a while, you know that I often speak about we don't want anyone to make health decisions based on headlines or hearsay. And this is an incredible example about how we can prioritize and learn about women's health by noticing that there's something in the headline, getting really curious, and then speaking with an expert and finding out what that means for us. And then, of course, choosing the journey that's right for us. So let's get started. I want to introduce you to our guest expert today, Dr. Bal Pawa. Bal, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Dr. Pawa is a physician, a pharmacist. She's the co-founder of the Westcoast Women's Clinic. She's a co-author of my first book, Mokita. She's an author of her own book, The Mind Body Cure. She's a women's health advocate. She is a friend of mine and a mentor and one of my go-to experts in this community called Menopause Chicks, where we just have an opportunity to ask our questions and get the great information that we need to move forward. So Bal, this was your idea. I'm not going to lie, this was not mine. You came to me when the research came out in January and said, hey, your community needs this. So what prompted you to do that?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Shirley, for cracking open this conversation on alcohol. And yes, I called you. We were communicating back and forth, but my office was overwhelmed. The women's clinic, they said, what? We didn't know that women's health would be so impacted by alcohol. The reports were on the TV and the newspaper. And I think you showed me a clipping earlier. And women started to sit up and listen. And I said, Shirley, you know what? I can't handle all those phone calls. We have to do a information session on this.
That's so true. And it showed up when we launched this event tonight. Like over 300 people have signed up to make sure that they can get the exact information that you have for us. So you're right. I was in Ontario when the research, when the news hit the newsstand. This is a copy of the Toronto Star from January. And it says, for those of you that can't see the bottom of my screen, 2 drinks a week, ? New guidelines have some of us fretting about past intake of alcohol and reevaluating our relationship with alcohol. What do you say to that, Dr. Pawa?
Well, alcohol and women, very interesting relationship. And, alcohol goes way back to we hear about wine in the Bible, but even before Christ's time, 7,000 BC. They found remnants of alcohol in these little pottery containers in archaeological digs. So alcohol goes way back. And you take that and where we are now, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So you look at where we've come and where alcohol has been so glorified and so permissive and so pervasive. Maybe we need to strike a happy medium somewhere. And I'm so glad that we're going to have a conversation about balancing information and health risks so we can draw the fine line between healthful drinking and harmful drinking and rethinking drinking in general.
Yeah, so clearly, I mean, we've been given these headlines and the new research, which was sponsored by Health Canada, for a reason. This has been, while all of us were maybe not counting our drinks and socializing all of these years, it's being studied, correct?
Oh, it's been studied, and the facts are sobering, Shirley. So that, pardon the pun, but sobering facts and statistics. for young women, older women, it's the data has been so compelling that the medical community said we just cannot sit on this anymore. And they've been lobbying to the government. Listen, alcohol is a carcinogen. You need to sit up and listen. And now the voice is getting louder and louder, and government just can't ignore it anymore.
Okay, so I want to dive right in to the women's health question. What are the differences between the impact of alcohol on a woman's body versus a man's?
Well, there are several anatomical differences. So pound for pound, if you took 100-pound man and 100-pound woman and you gave them drinks equal amounts, the woman will get intoxicated much faster, and her alcohol level will stay longer in the blood. The alcohol concentration will stay longer than a male. And the reason is because men have a lot more water in their body. So women and men differ. Yes, men have more muscle, but alcohol, as soon as you drink it, it gets absorbed through the stomach, goes through the liver, and the breakdown product of alcohol is acetaldehyde. And when you research acetaldehyde, there's a huge sheet on hazardous chemical. It's called a hazardous chemical. It's a mutagen. That means it causes changes in a baby if a woman is pregnant, which we now know, the fetal alcohol syndrome. But it also is a carcinogen, a grade 1 carcinogen. So when you read the hazardous substance that we're drinking, it really makes you realize, well, why don't we have warning labels on this? And the body composition is one. The second is our liver is very different. Male livers are different than female liver, and a male liver is anatomically larger. It can process alcohol a little bit more better. When acetaldehyde goes around the liver, the second time it breaks down into some acid called acetate. So women don't tend to do that. Our hormones are broken down by the liver. So when we look at estrogen and progesterone, they're broken down by the liver as well. Most hormones are, but it's really important when we reach menopause, our liver starts to function differently than a male liver. So there's some anatomical differences, and women need to be aware of that.
Okay, so this might not be fair as the second question, but it's the one that I get asked the most. And that is, wait a second, time out. My doctor told me that a glass of red wine every day is fine.
Yeah, that's the one that you really have to say, where was that study done? The devil's in the details. Here are the details.
Okay.
That study was done in the 80s. It was done on men. And yes, there is a substance in wine that's called resveratrol, and it can be really healthy for you. But you can also find resveratrol in grape juice. But why don't we drink grape juice, right? But resveratrol you can buy alone in capsules, but we shouldn't be drinking wine thinking that we're drinking and it keeps us healthy. It doesn't. It's the alcohol component in wine that becomes a breakdown product. They become what we call free radicals, and they break down tissues in the body, including your pancreas, your liver, your gut, bones in women, breast tissue, all kinds of what we call biological effects from the free radicals that are produced from alcohol. So we should be aware of that too.
Good understanding. Thank you. I think where we probably should go next, and I think you and I have talked about this before, is not all of us understand risk. So when we see the headline in the newspaper, it says zero drinks, right? No risk. 0 to 2 drinks, low risk. And then the scale goes up from there. And when we're quickly flipping through our phones or reading the newspaper, the brain can take that information and register it, and process it as saying, oh, I'm a non-drinker, therefore I don't have any health risks, right? And that's not the case, right? It means that there is no risk of alcohol-related diseases or conditions. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think what you're referring to for women in particular are when a woman comes in and she's asking for hormone therapy, I always, show them relative risk and absolute risk. And when we are counseling women, we say, well, if you've got family history of breast cancer, there's a strike against you. If you had kids at a very late age, that's a strike against you. So there are a lot of things that you cannot change with your anatomy, your genetics, but there are things that you can modify. And one of them is the alcohol consumption. We showed in a study, if you took 1,000 women and say you took 1,000 women that never took hormone therapy, 45 of them will still get breast cancer. And then if you took a woman who had hormone therapy for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, their numbers went up to 47 or 48, but women are getting older. But when you looked at alcohol, specifically 2 drinks a day, and I had a patient, she was a school teacher and she was 48 years old. And I said, do you drink alcohol? It's part of our questionnaire. And she said, no, not much, just a couple of glasses of wine with dinner. So I wrote down 14 drinks and oh my God, 14 drinks. And she said, I didn't realize it. So she had normalized just drinking a couple of glasses after work, cooking dinner, just that was her norm. And so we often normalize things. And I showed her the risk and she was so scared of hormone therapy. And I said, if you drink 2 drinks a day, your risk goes up to 72 women out of 1,000 that get breast cancer. So there's a strong correlation between alcohol consumption on a daily basis and the risk of breast cancer. And that has been solidified. That those studies from the 1980s have been debunked, and the newer studies from 2022, and they took thousands and thousands of international studies and came up with this associated risk for cancer as a carcinogen, alcohol, breast cancer for women, but in men also liver cancer, pancreas, throat, esophageal cancer. You look at the number of cancers that are rising. I had dinner with a friend who's a cancer specialist recently, and she was saying there's a tsunami of cancers. What's going on? And she's a cancer specialist. She said there seems to be a rise in cancers. So is it our diet? Is it our stress level? Is it radiation? Is it alcohol? We don't know. But we do know there's been a lot of associated risk with alcohol. We can't say it causes cancer, but there's a high correlation with the number of drinks and cancers.
Right, right. And are there other health concerns related to alcohol consumption that you can share with us?
Well, there are many. I think for women, what we have to think about is look at the women. We outlive men, right? We're biologically sort of a little bit more resilient, shall we say. We outlive men. We look at nursing homes, they're filled with women.
Right.
And the women are there because of dementia and because of broken hips, osteoporosis. So when I discuss alcohol, and I don't want people to think that I'm totally against alcohol. I just came back from a vacation, and of course I had some beverages that were alcoholic. So it's not that I'm over on one extreme.
Yeah.
I've just learned to be very mindful with alcohol. And when I look at women, I say, listen, osteoporosis is a big deal. Women end up in nursing homes because they break their hips, they break their spine. And we know that alcohol, the byproducts of alcohol, break down bone tissue. So osteoporosis is a big one. The second is, what does it do to the brain? Alcohol, even in small quantities, causes we know, like when you've had a few drinks, the word retrieval is a little slower. We know that memory recall is not sharp. We know we're not thinking really clearly. So that's just short term. Now imagine if every single day you exposed your brain to those toxins. Well, then it starts to land in brain tissue in the hippocampus area, which is the area where we consolidate memory. So your memory and amnesia is associated with brain loss and atrophy. So that affects women to a greater degree. And women tend to drink more to cope than men. So if we look at what happened in the pandemic, right, the sales for alcohol went way up, cannabis products went way up, but women really shouldered a big burden of responsibility during the pandemic because women were caregivers, they were homeschooling their kids, they were working from home. So they really had a lot of stress, but a lot of women were coping with that stress by drinking more. And so now the studies are coming in that I think it was, I got the 10% of women in Canada sought help for alcohol use disorder just in the past 2 years. So that's a pretty big number, the ones who actually went for help.
For sure. I mean, I consumed more alcohol during the pandemic, and we were saying just before the call today, I wasn't counting while I was consuming. So I'm not living an alcohol-free life at this point either. I know there are lots of movements happening around alcohol-free living. That's not what today is about, but there's been a shift in my consciousness, and I'm counting. And I'm actually asking myself, oh, if I'm going to have 2 drinks this week, right? When do I want to have them? Is it 1 on this day and 1 on this day, or is it 2 with wine, with dinner tonight? And I think that is like such an like, I love that you suggested this topic because it's awareness building, right? It's not black or white, it's awareness building.
It is. And awareness, just that awareness of what you choose and what you say yes to. Awareness is the agent of change. So if you want to change anything, the first step is to become aware of yourself and say, what do I say automatic yeses to? What have I normalized? And what has just become habituated? So your body gets conditioned. You come home every day, you reach for the glass of wine, you reach for the bottle, and it's just a habit. And then when we become aware of the choices we're making, the decisions we're making, it shouldn't be automatic. So we have to rise above the conditioning and the habituation and say, oh, wait a minute, I have a choice here. I don't have to do this. I can go for a walk. I can have a glass of, carbonated beverage, or I can have kombucha, or I can have some other alternatives. I just want to go back. You were talking about the other diseases, and I forgot to mention about pancreatic cancer, liver disease, and just for women too, the sexual violence that occurs when there's drinking. And we're talking about women's health, but women's health was impacted by drinking in general. So the rate of crime against women, domestic violence was one of them, or rapes and assaults, that number went up dramatically as well during the pandemic because of alcohol in the home, not because women were consuming of their partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something else, that's sort of a ripple effect that we don't think about.
For sure. I mean, there's so many ripple effects we could talk about, and we can come back to that about, risk of certain cancers and certain health conditions. But what about, and this didn't make headline news, what about the impact to our sleep and to our sexual desire?
Yeah, okay. Let's tackle sleep first, and then I'll talk about alcohol and hormones, because for women, hormones is a big deal. So alcohol, it's very dose dependent. So when you first drink alcohol, the first glass or two, you feel great, you feel relaxed, you feel uninhibited, there's no filters, you're just having a great time. Right. And it actually helped with anxiety and depression for the short term in a small dose. As it gets higher, then it becomes a depressant to the central nervous system. So initially, it's what we call an excitatory, it's dose dependent, and later it becomes a depressant. Then you get a little more weepy, you get a little more depressed, and then if you go higher and higher doses, then it can knock you out. But if you drink alcohol on a regular basis, it does disrupt your sleep. So if you're using alcohol to make you sleep, and we study the sleep wave patterns when people drink alcohol, they're not getting that deep REM sleep. They're not getting that restorative sleep. So using alcohol to get to sleep is probably not going to be a good idea for the long term, because sleep is like a washing machine cycle. You and I did a talk on sleep a long time ago. And if you don't go through all the deep wave, short wave, and REM and non-REM sleep, it's like the laundry comes out dirty on the other end, of the full machine cycle. So we have to cycle our brain waves through all those cycles to wake up in the morning and feel, a good sense of well-being. And remember, when you sleep at night, that's when melatonin is produced, your cortisol levels should be down. But when we drink alcohol, it is an irritant and it stimulates cortisol production. So it depresses your brain, but your cortisol's on. So you're just stewing in cortisol, which is an inflammatory agent. So
Right.
alcohol and sleep, not a good mix overall. Now let's talk about alcohol and hormones. So women tend to drink a lot more when they're in PMS, 2 weeks before their cycle. This has been studied. Women tend to go to bars more when they're in their PMS. They tend to drink more at home. Women drink a lot more in perimenopause.
Mhm.
And after menopause, the drinking gets a little bit less. Some women were drinking to help with anxiety, but they found that when they drank the same amount after menopause, they were getting hangovers and headaches.
Yes. I
And
hear
have
this a lot.
probably have heard that from
I hear it a
someone.
lot.
Yeah, so alcohol has a profound effect on our hormones. And for younger women, I'm really concerned. The ones who are binge drinkers in high school, they're in puberty, their ovarian tissue is so sensitive to smoking, alcohol, diet, stress. The ovarian tissue, when a young girl binge drinks, and now we're finding that girls are drinking more than boys in high school. They're
Yeah.
higher percentage of binge drinker of females. I mean, we're always looking at gender equality and no disparity, but women are catching up in bad ways that they're surpassing their male counterparts in drinking in high school. But what we're seeing is a higher rate of infertility later. So I was talking to an infertility specialist, and she said, I said, why is there so much infertility? And she said, binge drinking in high school, girls are never told this, that
No.
binge drinking damages their DNA. It damages their membranes of the follicles. It damages their chromosome material. So we really have to educate young girls and our daughters about this, because the media is not going to come out with this, because there's so much money to be made in the alcohol industry. And if you look at how they glamorize alcohol to young people, they're surfing and they're holding a Mike's Hard Lemonade or something, and they're showing really cool activities associated with alcohol. These young, impressionable girls think that if we drink, we're going to be very cool and we're going to be very hip, but they don't realize what it's doing to their ovarian tissue. So alcohol damages chromosomes. That's one. Alcohol affects your thyroid production, your
Yes.
estrogen, your progesterone, and your anti-Müllerian hormone is the hormone of fertility. That's what gets damaged in the ovaries as well. So I think it's really important for women to communicate this to their daughters, to their nieces, to their friends, that, hey, just because when men and women, we have equality, we also have to realize there are anatomical differences, and just be aware of what those differences are doing to our body with the same amount of alcohol.
For sure. I mean, as you're explaining this, I'm having one of those like common sense moments where I realize common sense is not always that common. Of course, when we put things like smoking and alcohol, things that our body is not supposed to have, it's going to impact the ovarian tissue and every other cell in our body, right? But how do we fight back against that socialization and social acceptability? How do you fight back against it? You're a doctor in a room with just one other patient most of the time, right? So you have the audience of one. What are some of the things that you say?
You know what I love about being a women's health specialist is that I love the ripple effect. So if I
Mm,
educate one woman, and we're educating hundreds today, hopefully,
right.
but the ripple effect is so good because women are collaborators. They want to
Yes.
help each other. They
Yes.
communicate. They want the best for each other. Men could sit side by side. They could golf for 5 hours, and one guy didn't tell the other he has prostate cancer. They never talk about anything. They
Right.
don't share information
Right.
personal. But women are fantastic communicators. So I think, if we look at what one mother of a drunk driver, remember the MAD was started by one woman.
Yes.
Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. She was a woman. And look at how powerful that institution is now. MAD is making policy changes. They're bringing about all kinds of laws that have been reinforced because of her experience. So women have power, and women who are informed and have knowledge have even more power. So I think if we can help each other to educate each other, make better decisions, educate younger women, I think we're going to have a huge ripple effect here. We're going to be very woke when media tries to show us that drinking is cool. Drinking can be cool, but can also be harmful. And the government, you have to remember something here. Economics has a lot to do with it, Shirley.
Yes.
50 years ago, the medical community came together and said, look, there is a huge, compelling amount of information that lung cancer and smoking are associated. They didn't want to hear it. Came back again to the table. It took decades before they put a warning label on cigarette boxes about smoking and lung cancer. Same way, we've been saying this for the last 5 years to the government. There is a very strong association with alcohol and cancer. Look at the numbers. Look at these studies. They're coming in from Europe. And you know what? The government's not listening because there's a lot of money. Our biggest taxes come from cigarettes, tobacco, and alcohol.
Yeah.
So the government has to think this decision through very carefully because there's a lot of tax dollars that are going to be lost. But if we were smart, if I look at what Heineken is doing, Heineken, the beer, they started a non-alcoholic beer, and those sales have surpassed. They're seeing that, no or low alcohol beverages are the next market. And maybe, the government could tax those instead. But the rest of the world has started embracing no and low alcohol.
Yes, they have,
for the greater good of their community.
Mm-hmm.
But North America, we have not. We're still sitting back, well aware of this risk and not doing anything about it. And I don't think we will see warning labels on bottles for a very long time. It took a long time to even warn them about pregnancy and fetal alcohol syndrome. So I think this is going to take at least another 5 years before we see warning labels.
So you're pro warning label. Do you think it will make a difference?
It's a deterrent. I don't think it's going to stop people, but it's a deterrent. It makes you think. You were talking about awareness. Just having that little label there will just deter you and stop for a second. And then you have a little moment of making a decision. Do I take that drink or not?
Got it. Well, you've also really helped me today too, because I moderate a lot of questions around thyroid and low sexual desire and sleep and osteoporosis. And I can bring this information into some of the questioning and affect that one woman that will hopefully have a ripple effect as well. So that's been really great learning for me as today as well.
I didn't address the testosterone. So testosterone, libido. In small doses, alcohol actually increases libido. So when you have your first drink or two, the alcohol will help libido. But after that, it's a depressant for libido. So, it's in the long term, it's not the cure for libido. And libido is a really interesting topic. We could do another talk on libido. Libido for women is a very complex issue. It's not just about testosterone. It's about making sure the house is clean, the relationship is good, the garbage is taken out. So many things have to be in place before a woman actually gets in the mood. But, testosterone has been implicated in low libido, and testosterone is affected by alcohol for sure.
Right. And libido or sexual desire is impacted by stress, and stress often leads us to alcohol. So what a Rubik's Cube we've created for ourselves, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of women are using alcohol as a soothing behavior. And, we're talking a lot about trauma and the whole vicious cycle. They say we drink to deal with trauma, and then we experience new trauma while drinking, and then repeat. So it's hard to get out of that cycle of shame, drinking, and abuse. And it's a vicious cycle. But mental health is a really big thing for women. coping with stress, and hopefully at the end of our discussion, we'll talk about, ways for mindful drinking. We'll talk
Yes.
about stress management and just becoming more aware of it.
So the second page of that article was a chart, as I mentioned. It showed, 0 drinks, 1 to 2 drinks, 3 to 4, 5 to 7. It was per week. That was the time frame. So
Yeah.
what do you say when one of your patients asks you, Dr. Pawa, what's a safe amount for me to be drinking?
When I did all of that research, I wrote an article, as you know, and in that
Yep.
article, they said no amount of alcohol can be safe. But I'm a realist too. We can't walk around with our head in the sand and say, well, we're not going to drink. We're going to drink. But 2 to 4 drinks is the new norm. It's the new recommendation. 2 to 4 drinks a week is the new norm. And here's another factor that a lot of women don't think about. When we drink wine, for example, and this came up to me, I was on the nutritional committee for the doctors of BC. We're
Okay.
sitting around, we're drinking a glass of wine and analyzing data at 9 o'clock at night. And we're looking at all the food industry and say, wow, food is really heavily regulated because we want to see how much pesticide they're using. But I said to one of the doctors, I said, who's regulating the wine industry for pesticides? And they said, wow, there's nobody minding that. They only look at the alcohol content. So they say alcohol in wine should be, about 10% or less. But nobody was looking at pesticides. And so when we're drinking wine, did you know that when we harvest grapes, they're not even washed, they're collated, then they're concentrated, they're fermented, we make wine, and then we analyze the wine to see how much percent alcohol is in that wine, but no one was looking at the heavy metals or the pesticide. And when we started analyzing it, it was remarkably high. But wine does not fall under the food category. So food inspectors were not in the wineries checking, pesticide count. So I teach women how to drink smartly. I said, look, choose your wine that is from a good grower, that is organic and heavy metal free. So choose good quality wine. Drink 1 to 2 glasses and then have 3 or 4 days to allow your liver to get the enzymes back, because the same enzymes that break down alcohol are breaking down your estrogen. So if you're not breaking down estrogen, your toxic forms of estrogen, like estrone, they collect into the breast tissue or the bone tissue, or they form toxic byproducts. So that's what you want to do, is you want to try and have 3 or 4 days between the drinks to allow enough time for the liver to settle down. So have 2 to 4 drinks a week, and then the rest of the time, pace yourself, hydrate yourself with water and lemon. Lemon is a very good detoxifier for the liver. So having a drink, then some water, having a drink and some water, and learning how to savor wine, really enjoy it, make it a, don't feel like you're depriving yourself. It's all mindset. So we often think, oh, the doctor told me I can't drink wine. But the wine you are drinking, drink it and really enjoy it and really savor the taste of it. So using all your senses to create a nice multisensorial experience with that wine is going to be better than drinking 5 glasses of it, but drinking that 1 glass and really enjoying it and having, a nice memory around it.
I love that. I'm not surprised to get that information from you, because you're the author of The Mind Body Cure. This is your jam. And so, you alluded to mental health a minute ago and maybe like some mindfulness tricks. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I was just going to, talk about sort of detox and having really helpful ways. That I found that one of the most helpful things that a woman taught me was in this olive and vinegar store on the Sunshine Coast. And my girlfriends and I walked in, and she said, it's a vinegar tasting night. And I said, what? Vinegar tasting? And so they had all kinds of balsamic vinegar reductions, raspberry vinegar, peach vinegar. And she showed us that you can take 2 teaspoons of this vinegar, mix it with some mineral water, and it was a delicious spritzer. So I thought, wow, this is a probiotic. It's got minuscule amount of alcohol because vinegars are fermented, as you know,
Yeah.
and you're enjoying being social because we've glorified drinking as a celebratory, we like to drink when someone is having a birthday, someone's having a party, someone's born. We even drink at funerals, at the reception. So alcohol is a big part of our socializing.
Yeah.
So if we can now substitute the alcohol with spritzers or kombucha or water with lemon, I think those are really things, what you said earlier, being mindful, being really aware. I'm walking into this celebration. What am I going to do? I'm going to automatically reach for the wine, or am I going to be very, very responsive and think it through before I get there? So having a mindset of, responsiveness, so that you walk in and you plan to drink responsibly, right?
I love that. I also have one of those vinegar stores here in Port Moody, so I'm
Oh,
gonna go check it out.
oh, I think
I
a lot of
never
non-alcoholic drinks, mocktails are becoming very popular. As you know, they're almost as expensive as
Yes.
non-alcoholic wine. But the industry around the world is changing billions of dollars. Can you imagine Heineken spent billions of dollars to market their new non-alcoholic beer? And that's what everybody's going to be drinking. So North America is a little slow to catch up because our government is so influenced by the economics and the money they get from the alcohol industry. They're going to be a little slower, but we as women can get ahead of the curve and start teaching our kids and teaching our sisters and teaching our friends that, hey, there are options here. We can think differently.
Yes.
Rethinking drinking. Yeah.
Rethinking drinking. It's a great hashtag. Because like my generation grew up and we were taught not to drink and drive, right? It was like, you can drink, you just can't do this one activity from drinking. But I like that now we have a new generation that can rethink and be more aware of what it's doing to our tissues and to our cells and impacting our health. So that's a big aha for me. I'm
Yeah.
going to go to a couple of questions, Bal.
Okay.
Moira wants to know, is lime as good as lemon for detoxifying the liver?
That's a good question, Moira. I would say that they're probably pretty equivalent, lime and lemon. I always read about lemon, but no one mentioned lime because limes are not as, prevalent. But I would say they're the same family. They should be the same, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, well, we can leave that challenge with you.
We'll have to research that, but we do know that lemon rind, the oil that's in the lemon rind. So when you buy a bag of organic lemons and you pour hot water, you can actually see an oily layer on the water. And it is a very good way to detoxify the liver. It works on the liver, even bitters, things like radicchio, any Swedish bitters, they used to call them bitter things, help to detoxify the liver as well.
Good tip. Good tip. Okay. It's a bit of a long one. Does alcohol percentage affect the number of safe drinks and
Yeah.
reduce the level of toxicity? I can't talk today. Impact on your body. So a vodka soda with low or no sugar, for example, versus a glass of wine.
Okay, so when we talk about a standard drink, we say, okay, 12 ounces of beer is a standard drink. That's one drink. It has about 5% alcohol. When we talk about wine, it's about 5 fluid ounces and it's about 10 to 12% alcohol.
Right.
Now, when we get into distilled alcohol, it's a whole different ballgame. 1.5 fluid ounces of tequila, vodka, whiskey is 40% alcohol. So if you're having 2 drinks of the distilled spirits, that's a pretty high content of alcohol. So if you're going to drink, try to stick to beer and wine as the 2 drinks. But if you're having 2 drinks of scotch a day, then because it's the amount of alcohol, the percentage of alcohol, that's the carcinogen component. So you want to really limit those to 2 drinks a week, and then the other ones go to 2 to 4 drinks a week.
Yeah,
But the
I think that's
percentage of alcohol you have to look at.
really good
A
clarification.
great question. Great
That
question.
Great question. Jennifer is curious about taking milk thistle as a supplement to help the liver. She may mean in general, or she may mean to detoxify the liver after drinking. Not sure.
Yeah, so we haven't seen, I poured through lots of studies to say, can we undo the damage if a liver has been exposed to alcohol? How do we undo it? They said basically abstinence is the only way, and hydration and lots of lemon. But does milk thistle work right after a drinking binge? I don't think it works like that. I have used milk thistle for some of my patients when I've seen that their liver enzymes have been elevated. I put them on a 10-week or 12-week protocol to detoxify their liver. And I do use milk thistle or artichoke thistle. So there are some good studies on that, but I don't know if it works right after. I think it takes time for it to work, is my point.
Right. And that is one of the other conversations that I've had on the last couple of months is, what about those of us who used to drink more heavily? Does that mean that that risk is carried with us throughout a lifetime, or can we actually undo any of it?
Yeah, so the data that was dug up on that said it depends on the number of years. So same with smoking, they talk about 1 pack a year. If you smoked a pack a day for 5 years, 10 years, how long does it take to clean up the tissues? I think it's the same with alcohol. If you've been chronically drinking, there is some damage that's going to be irreversible in your brain, in your liver, in your pancreas. There's going to be some degree of irreversible damage. But the day you stop, you start seeing that new tissues, our body is pretty resilient. It turns over a lot of tissues, especially the liver. But when I've been treating patients for 30 years, and when I found that if their liver enzymes were slightly elevated, I caught them in time, got them cleaned up, their liver enzymes went back to normal, no damage was done. But if you reached a point of fibrosis in the liver, where we saw scar tissue in the liver, then it was the next stage to cirrhosis. So I think you reach a point where you cannot reverse it. So you have to really look at how much did they drink, how much damage did they do to their brain, to their liver. But I think the sooner you stop damaging, the better you're going to be and the more your body will recover. So I think just, being aware and starting today, making some behavioral changes, it'll still help you. It may not reverse the degree of damage because I don't know how much damage was done. So it depends on the individual.
What are your colleagues saying? What's the conversation happening amongst physicians?
We're having a lot of talks about this because we have regular CMEs, right? Continuing medical education to stay on top of things. And we've made a decision as a group, because it was always nice restaurant with a nice glass of wine. We've really decided, in the 3 or 4 groups that I belong to, that we're going to make a concerted effort we're already eating healthy, but we're not going to put the focus on wine. We're going to start experimenting with mocktails and using kombucha, using all kinds of other things to substitute. So we've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think there are going to be changes that physicians are making in their own lives.
Amazing. Just wondering if there's any, are there any, somebody wants to know, are there any studies that compare alcohol to marijuana use?
I'm sure there are. I didn't study any of them because when I was doing the research on alcohol, they talked about cannabis and alcohol. But as a pharmacist, I can tell you that cannabis works on the cannabinoid receptors in the brain. Right. And people say you can't get addicted to cannabis, but you can. And I have seen patients addicted to cannabis. So it's more of a brain. Alcohol is more of a, I think alcohol causes more free radical damage. I didn't read anywhere that cannabis causes free radical damage, whereas alcohol, because it goes through the liver, it forms acetaldehyde, acetic acid, acetate. Those chemicals are damaging to the tissue. So I did read a lot of that. I think the cannabis, it was more to do with psychological dependence and apathy, and it does lower your testosterone, but it doesn't damage the tissues as much.
Good to know. And yeah, again, that's something that is now more socialized, and more women self-medicating, right?
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes. Women are often using cannabis, actually, Shirley, for hot flashes and anxiety too, and sleep, and they're using CBD oil. And actually, some of the CBD oil studies were quite encouraging. And at the North American Menopause Society meetings, they talked about CBD oil. I think, if you have a very purified form of cannabis and use it very judiciously, it can be helpful for hot flashes, and it can be helpful for anxiety as well.
Yeah.
But everything, if you overuse it and you tend to depend on something external outside of you, then there's a potential for dependence and addiction. So you got to be really careful
Yeah.
that how you're using it.
And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about hot flashes or sleep or anxiety. The root cause of those things is not lack of CBD,
No,
right? Like, it's great that there are options available. Get informed, choose the journey that's right for you. But yeah, as you taught me, find and treat the root cause is really what's going to have the longitudinal benefits for us.
that's correct. And I think, with hot flashes too, a lot of women, they drink to get rid of anxiety, but then most women, you'll see that a couple of glasses of wine will trigger their hot flashes.
Yeah.
So some of your audience might want to comment on that, but when they drink, their hot flashes go up. Women after menopause found that it was, hangover and headaches were more prevalent after menopause. So, it shows that the liver goes through a metamorphosis as we change from our stages of perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause. Our liver is actually changing as well. Our brain is changing. So it's a part of our aging process. But as long as we're aware of the physiology, we can make adjustments to our lifestyle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Drink more water. We can all
That's
do
a lot
that.
more water, yeah. And managing stress, for women, I think coping, we talked about coping with stress, but drinking mindfully, the first thing that I would tell women is, when you reach for that drink, are you drinking because you like the taste of it, or are you drinking because you like how it makes you feel?
Hmm.
Right? So when you're drinking for the taste of it and you want to savor it and you want to smell the bouquet of grapes or the year, and you've got a very sophisticated palate, you're heightening your sense of awareness of all your senses. But when you drink, and then you drink because it's making you feel better, it makes you feel more relaxed, it makes you feel like you're escaping something, then that's where you have to become very astute about what is alcohol doing for you, and is there another soothing behavior that might be better suited for your health. And this is where some choices have to be made.
That's really great. I think we can craft some questions to ask ourselves from this conversation and from the information that you've shared with us, because are you drinking to sleep, fall asleep, to stay awake, to chase the feeling? There's probably lots of things that we can look in the mirror and ask ourselves and learn from those answers, if we're
And
honest.
also, also going back to what have you normalized as an individual? Because that school teacher I was telling you, she thought
Right.
it was completely normal for her to go home and have 2 or 3 glasses of wine with dinner. That was her norm.
Yes.
So I invite all of your guests on your show today to really think about, what have you normalized? What is normal in your household? That, you go to the fridge and you reach for a beer when you're watching TV at night. Is that normal for you? And is that healthful or harmful? So just being aware, that ability to think about what we're thinking is called metacognition, when you rise above your conditioning. And if we can all, just think about what we're thinking, that puts us in control again, right? We are the thinkers of our thoughts. We are the ones who choose. But if we leave our brain to do the automatic things, then we become conditioned. We go in and we just do whatever we do, and we get the same results every day. So if you want to change your behavior, you really have to rise above and be in touch with your higher self, your awareness, your consciousness, the thinker who does the thinking. And then I think you can make better changes, whether it be for drinking, for eating, for
Right.
exercise, for any of the other healthy behaviors that we want people to do. It all begins in the mindset.
Amazing. And yes, we do have a few guests chiming in about the relationship of alcohol and hot flashes. It is a trigger. So is spicy foods and coffee, but I do like to remind women that the root cause of those hot flashes is not the coffee or the alcohol. It's usually something else that we need to get curious about, flex our curiosity muscle.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, Dr. Pawa, what do you want women to take away from this conversation and this research about alcohol and the impact to our health?
I think the biggest thing is that as women, we really have to collaborate with each other, educate each other, and realize that women and men are equal, but they're different. So we've reached a stage in our lives. We've got, lower wage disparity. We've got equal rights, but we are different anatomically. And let's be aware of that difference when it comes to alcohol, and don't let social media and glamorization of alcohol influence how we behave. And I think that's important. I think we also have to realize that how alcohol affects us specifically for brain, bone, and breast tissue. Those are 3 things we should bear in mind and mitigate those risks.
Sure.
And the third thing is just rethinking the drinking. So we associate alcohol with having fun, but can we have fun without alcohol? So that's a question, is, are we, able to, as women, dissociate from alcohol, like the mindset that you have to have alcohol in order to celebrate? Can we celebrate? Can we have events and make some concerted effort to say, well, what are healthy behaviors? So we model our younger generation of women. And it's going to take women to change this. I really strongly feel it's going to be women
I do
who have
too.
change.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much for suggesting this, for doing the research on our behalf, showing up and sharing today. I can't thank you enough. And this is going to be definitely a piece of educational content that's going to live on for a very long time in the Menopause Chicks community.
Well, thank you, Shirley, for having me. And thank you to everyone. Great questions. Always a pleasure to be
You
here.
have a beautiful sunset on your face right now.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of sun coming out.
Yeah, it's coming in through here as well. Go enjoy your evening. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.